Many thanks to Mariu and Hannah for their invitation to participate in this event as part of the European Capital of Culture Tartu 2024. I'm excited to be part of Creative Connections, and I wish I was able to join you in person today in Palupera Elementary School. If anyone has any questions for me, I have included my email address at the end of the presentation, and I encourage you to get in touch. My name is Jennie Guy. I'm a curator, artist and writer based in Dublin, Ireland. My practice explores new contexts for artistic experimentation rooted in collaborative inquiry. As an artist, I work in different forms, including films, performances, installations and texts. Until a few years ago, I worked as the Programm manager at Fire Station Artist Studios in Dublin. Now I'm focused on curating large-scale public art commissions for a range of clients. For today, I will be focused on Art School, a longer-term art and education project that I've been working on for the past 10 years. As founder and director of this independent project, I've been curious to advance an experimental framework that explores strategies for placing artists within sites of education. I will also tell you about the book Curriculum, Contemporary Art Goes to School, which I edited and published with Intellect Books in 2020. Through Art School and Curriculum, I want to reflect on some of the ambitions that Mariu and Hannah have been discussing with me through our background email exchange. Specifically, I want to focus on how the Art School project acts as a space through which students have been introduced to artistic practice that implicitly provide opportunities to explore different modes of collaboration and self-expression, through which to build a sense of belonging that extends not only to their current school settings, but within a wider, longer-term artistic and creative community. This invitation to present today has given me an opportunity to reflect on the Art School project being 10 years old, so I will reflect on this timeline as I tell you about 3 specific projects and give you an introduction to the book Curriculum. I'm going to jump right into a project in order to introduce you to how Art School works. Art School is premised on a 3-way exchange involving artists, students, and a curator. Through this model, I advance projects in a range of formats that explore schools and other sites of education as a context for artistic production. Sometimes these projects are short workshops, while at other times they involve longer-term artist and school residencies. These variables are determined on a project-by-project basis in response to the relationship that I develop with the schools, the funders, and the artist that I select as curator. The selection of artists is an important element of this process, and I will talk more about that later. The project we are seeing in the background, Thinking Visual, was developed in 2015 with the artist Sven Andersson as a multi-week residency at Blessington Community College in Wicklow, working with 16 to 17-year-old students. Sven wanted to introduce the students to sound art as an artistic medium. To break the ice on the first day, he brought in a selection of vinyl records and 2 turntables. He taught the students how to manipulate the surfaces of the records by cutting them with knives and layering them with tape in order to produce different noises and loops when they were played back. During the next session, Sven brought a small group of the students into the city centre of Dublin for a trip to the neighbourhood with the thrift shop where he bought these records, where he helped the students capture field recordings of the urban environment. As Sven presented his own work involving sound installations to the students, they became interested in making their own sound installation within the school. Instead of negotiating this for the students, Sven and I helped them prepare a presentation for their school principal to request the school's permission to make a semi-permanent sound installation for an outdoor passageway. Here you can see the students presenting to their principal.
We're going to set up the sounds that they orientate between 4 different pieces created by the people you see around you.
That's right. I think what you're doing is wonderful. Talking to Tarla, art to me was sculpture, painting, and sound is a new aspect of it. I think it's a great idea.
With the principal's permission, Sven worked with the students to develop the installation on a small budget, working with a series of wooden beams cut in the school's woodworking shop, equipped with sonic transducers that played back a selection of field recordings chosen by the students. Working as a group, the students naturally took on different roles and were able to feel what it was like to bring a collaborative artistic expression from concept to realization, and for other students in their school to experience and react to their work on a day-to-day basis. Concerns of self-expression, both within an individual and a group context, have always been central to the projects I develop with different artists in art school. Let's look at a 2-session workshop by the artist Carl Burke, followed by a longer-term residency with the artist Sarah Pearce to bring this more to the surface. Carl's workshops took place within a project titled I'll Be in Your Camp, Will You Be in Mine in 2017. This project enabled young students at an inner city school in Dublin City to engage creatively with artists working in the nearby third level art school at Technological University of Dublin, TUD. Carl was teaching there at the time and was invited to share his practice with the students in the context of their school, located merely a few blocks away from where he was usually teaching. Carl presented to the students in almost the same manner he would talk with university students, introducing the work of other artists whose works had influenced his own practice. He showed them slides of Erwin Wurm's series of 1-minute sculptures, stopping on each slide to ask the students what it made them feel. They started to talk more as a group, at which point Carl invited them to make their own 1-minute sculptures, which he proceeded to photograph. Watching the students' progress with this activity was incredible. They appropriated items from around the classroom, balancing them on their heads, positioning them between their bodies, setting them in motion, moving them into new configurations, all the while becoming more and more animated as they interacted with each other to form these sculptures. You can see the free sense of self-expression that emerged through the students' experimentation as their work unfolded into the second day of the workshop, where Carl continued to work with them to appropriate classroom items to develop architectural assemblages, extending them with colourful electrical tape. Having seen the provocative images Carl had showed them the day before, the students were able to open up to each other through a series of critiques that finished off the workshop. We can see this level of self-expression emerging again in Sarah Pearce's longer-term residency series, Playing. Sarah used Bertolt Brecht's Lehrstück, experimental plays in which the actors are also the audience, as a starting point for developing a new work with the students in which they would be the authors, the cast, and the audience, resulting in a one-time only performance titled Black Square. Sarah described this residency as follows. Over the course of 7 weeks, the students worked together to make a new script for a play based on chants and gestures that slowly built over the course of the residency. We laughed, we played, we focused on the task at hand. We talked about social issues and what it means to make an artwork, to put something out in the world that risks being misunderstood, and to do it anyway. Day 1 began with the students gathered in the gymnasium, where a special wall was prepared for the first group exercise. The task was to paint a 3 by 3 metre black square. Everyone took on a part, painting, taping, advising, and cleaning up. When we were finished, we sat back and our conversation about the square formed into the first lines or chants of our play. This is not a square. You are the only square for me. You are patchy. You're like a rainbow, dark. From here, each week built on the one before, and soon we had a series of chants and gestures that proceeded out of our conversations and a large group tableau vivant that we made during the week 4. We performed the play on the last day. The students were the audience and the performers, continually shifting in and out, and the square was our commons, bringing us together and belonging to each of us. This is a perfect segue towards the topic of belonging. I want to walk you through an art school residency with the artist Vanessa Donoso Lopez, working with younger students. This project was titled Other, Other, Other. We chose this title for the project because it took place around the time of the Marriage Equality Act of 2015, when the Irish state legalised same-sex marriage through a popular vote. We wanted to explore ideas of otherness and belonging with younger students through a range of subjects, and to invite these students to understand different perspectives through embodied collaborative practices. This was particularly important to us in the context of this school, which was set in a rural context in which a larger percentage of the population had opposed the Marriage Equality Act. Vanessa introduced herself and her own feelings of estrangement from her home in Spain since moving to Ireland. She told the students about her practice and the inspirations she took from the architecture of Antonio Gaudí in Barcelona. She explored how Gaudí's forms often drew inspiration from nature, before telling them about her own interest in working with clay that was sourced in her homeland, as it carried with it a sense of her place of origin. Vanessa invited the students to bring in natural elements from their homes and the areas they were most familiar with. Echoing a series of hexagonal tiles in one of Gaudí's buildings, Vanessa worked with the students to create a series of intricate clay tiles, each inset with patterns that bore a trace of the objects each student brought in. By tracing her own autobiographical narrative through the workshop and inviting the students to bring forth traces of their own local environments, Vanessa highlighted the importance of having a sense of belonging, whether you are a stranger or a local, and enabled the students to sense this together through the intricate forms that they created as a group through their tiles. This pathway of tiles was set in place in a local gallery context. The students were invited to walk on the tiles, which were never fired, to solidify them, and at a later date, these same tiles were returned outdoors to let the clay return to earth. I'm sure you can tell from these projects we had a lot of fun. Bringing artists into schools and facilitating these kinds of experimental processes was very rewarding. At the same time, because art school is an independent curatorial framework, I had to continually consider my own capacity and what was possible to achieve from project to project. There was a moment when these types of projects emerged one after the other, and it felt like this format could be continued almost infinitely. But then, at a certain point, I decided that the next step was to try to contextualize all of the work that was happening through art school within a written format, where there would be space for critique, reflection, and conjecture, away from the day-to-day realities of running projects in schools. So it was at this point that I developed the publication Curriculum Contemporary Art Goes to School. So for this book, I commissioned 13 writers to connect with different artists who had worked on art school projects and to develop an essay exploring some aspect of either the project, the artist's wider practice in relation to education, or the larger framework of art school. The book also features a visual essay in which the book's designer, Peter Mabry, assembled a series of stills from the video documentation of the projects that I had shot. You can see some of these images here. They really bring you into the intimate space of the schools and the social environment of the students. I wish I could read to you from every essay, but for today I will limit myself to reading one passage. This is from the curator Claire Butcher's essay, Preparatory Gestures for a Future Curriculum, which focused on the artist Sarah Pearce's residency, Playing, that I told you about a moment ago. This is in reference to the performance of the square. These negotiations and situations are not readily available in documentation traceable in an artist or academic archive. There is something to be said for Lehrstock logic here. As the project reiterates itself, moving through these different gestures, different words, different structures, the protocols multiply in different bodies. Those exercises in recognizing power and embodying a response to it could become muscle memories in ways that go beyond measurable skills development. One cell, one ligament, one shift in perception at a time. Beyond individual coping mechanisms, the force of such a co-authored curriculum of embodied self-care, rather than a generalized notion of empowerment, could operate in the understanding that particular conditions are usually symptomatic of a larger, complex experienced by many. Ways to meet those conditions for oneself and together could be found in these preparatory gestures for a situated social justice. The essay concludes with this passage. Collapse and rise, collapse and rise. The bodies move through the final acts of their learning play. Huddling, hovering. They link arms and feel the latitude of the space. Finally forming a single row, side by side, down on the floor. They whisper to no one and one another. Their breath hangs in the air. We have no shame. This phrase, "we have no shame," has stuck with me since the first time I heard it uttered by a student as part of Sarah Pearce's project. Art school often enabled moments like what occurred in Sarah's residency with the Square, in which artists, students, and other members of the school community participated in moments that transcended what we all thought was possible within the familiar context of the school. Looking back after 10 years of work on art school, I see this project as part of a new wave of art and education initiatives in Ireland. Since the time I started working on the project in 2014, I've observed more and more funding opportunities to support work in this field. Still, I wanted to conclude by bringing an emphasis back to the curatorial dimension of art school, which is something that I do not always sense within the other funding frameworks and project initiatives that I see coming forth. The three-way relationship between curator, artist, and school is a very powerful triangulation, as it supports all of the behind-the-scenes invisible work that takes place before the projects begin, such as convincing artists to get involved, convincing schools to open their doors to more experimental practices, trying to raise the funding from the right partners, and so on. What tends to happen is that a more administrative function comes in to take over in the space of the curatorial. And as practitioners working together in this field, I think it's important to emphasize that this is not the same thing, and that while it might support projects taking place, it is not always conducive to realizing projects of the same potential. I can observe specific examples of this in Ireland. For instance, when the Arts Council began its Creative Schools National Art and Education Programme a few years ago, a UK-based consultancy was hired to administrate the project. This is not to say that this is not a vibrant programme, but the systemic emphasis on administration can often overshadow and even displace the more dynamic relationship that can exist between schools, artists, and curator. I hope that this presentation and the work of art school is useful in the context of the other presentations and discussions today, and that you have found these glimpses of past projects interesting, whether or not you're an artist, curator, art administrator, teacher, principal, student, parent, or anyone interested in the potential of exploring contemporary art in the context of education. This last slide has my email address, a link to my YouTube page, which contains videos to the projects I've discussed, and a link to purchase the book curriculum in print and electronic formats. I encourage you to request a copy for your library if you are working in an educational institution. Otherwise, please get in touch with me if you have any questions, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you.